Okay, so this is going to be how to set up SVN and how to set up your Unity project to work well with others. I'm just importing Playmaker into a project. I'm going to make a brand new project, and I'm going to call this one Group Project Number 1. And I'm going to import nothing to start. So the very first thing you need to do is tell Unity how to handle its metadata. And Unity uses metadata to track changes across your folders. So when you make a new Unity project, the first thing you need to do is go to your editor settings. So you go under Edit, Project Settings, Editor. And only one person should be doing this. Only one person needs to make the project. So whoever you designate to be your group leader in your group should be the one that's doing these steps. You can't both make a new project. You both need to work in the same project, but you each have to have your own folders and your own scenes. So you're working under the same project, but different scenes. So whoever is in charge, I guess Carlos, you're going to be the lead since Carly's not here. And whoever else is missing their partner, pick the leader and make a new Unity project and go to Project Settings Editor. And up in the top right under Version Control, these options are grayed out because you need Unity Pro to support them, but that's okay. We want to enable the visible meta files. Making these files visible means that now SVN can properly track the new and changed and moved files in SVN because it doesn't hide them, it doesn't keep them hidden. Another option that you should probably check to be true if you want to handle cases where, let's say you run into a case where both of you guys make the same change to a scene. You both were working in the same scene at home at the same time, and you both try to commit to SVN. You're going to run into a conflict where one person's changes might get lost and the other person's changes will be used to overwrite. Asset serialization here, if you change everything to be forced text, this will cause your Unity project to be slower. You probably won't notice it unless you have a really large project and lots of assets and objects. But if you enable this, this will change your project so that when it saves the next time, it will save everything out as text instead of binary, and so two people could work on the same scene and not lose each other's work. I'm going to keep this mixed for now. It's going to try to keep it text where it makes sense and keep it binary. But just something to keep in mind, if you have a lot of issues with let's say you need to work in the same scene, you just can't separate out the scene, you're going to want to enable this so you guys can work together. Okay, so once you enable this, save the project and close the project. Go to the location where your project is created. So for me, I made it under my Documents folder. There's a Group Project Number 1. And there's an Assets folder, which is empty because I have no assets, and a Library folder, which has all my other built-in assets and project settings. So in my case here, I want to check my entire folder into SVN. So I'm going to go and let's just go to the repro browser in SVN. I like using the repro browser because it just gives me like a folder view. We're working in 2014. I'm going to make a new folder here right now. Not add folder. I'm going to make a new one. GA4401. You guys don't need to do this step. The only step you need to do is to actually make your group project folder. And here, I'm going to make a new folder for Group Project Number 1. Everyone should be working out of this everyone should be working out of this folder for the project for this week and next week. I'm going to make Group Project Number 2 and 3 and 4, and I could probably do that now, and so on and so forth. And eventually we're going to have 4 of these and then a final project folder. I'm just making these ahead of time so you guys have somewhere to put all your work. And then there will be a final project. And if I find any useful software that you need, I'll put it up on SVN as well. So here in Group Project Number 1, make a team name for yourself, or if you're not creative and you don't want to make a team name, just put both of your names in a folder. Make a folder here that is unique. Keith. I'm making a Keith is Amazing folder. That's my group name because I'm by myself. So in this folder, and you guys can make your own folders under here, this is where I'm going to put my group project directory. So I'm just going to drag it here. So now in here, I have all of my assets, and everything is good. Now I'm going to delete the project that I made. This is the next step that you have to do. This project that I have right here is not linked to SVN. This is something I made only on my machine, so SVN doesn't know about it. The simplest way for me to do this is just to delete this project and then download it from SVN as the server so that the link is created. There are ways to link the folder that you make to SVN automatically, but I don't. The simple, surefire way is to just delete that project, and I'm going to download it again by using the SVN checkout command. And I can also use the repro browser too. I have the repro browser open, so I can just do that. So I'll show you how to set that up. So with the repro browser open, I can go to group project number 1, Keith is Amazing, and I can just check this folder out. I'm going to put it on my desktop. It's going to go into a folder called Keith is Amazing. Cool. There's my group project number 1. And there are my folders with nothing in it. Now I'm going to go to Unity. I'm going to open up that folder as a project. Go to my desktop, go here, open up group project number 1. And notice, look at the folder here. See how there's a temp file, a temp folder here? You want to make sure that this folder is not getting included when you add, or when you're checking stuff in. So the way that you do this is with the project running, right-click on this temp folder, go to Tortoise SVN, and click Add to Ignore List, and do it recursively. What this is going to do is this is going to set up a rule so that if SVN ever tries to add this folder, it's just going to ignore it as if it doesn't exist. And then the next final step you have to do is you actually have to commit, and it does a property change on the group project folder, change temp directory to be ignored, and hit OK. And now, no matter what is in this temp directory, it will never check it in. So if I were to add any file into here, let's just say I make a new text document, test temp file, and then I try to check in all of these files, it doesn't find that temp file that I created. It's ignoring that folder. And that's it. So the only final step you should do is you should make some folders here. So I'm going to make one for K-Myron, make one for whoever else is in your group. I'll make one for my brother. Okay. And you would work and make your scenes in each of your respective folders. So if you were to save this scene, you should put it in your folder. So like so. And then if you need to combine your work, when you're finally ready to pull your work together, you should make a scenes folder in the root. And this is where you would put, this is your root scene. And if I close Unity, and I go to commit, it has all these things that it finds. Notice it's adding all these library files too. So this is an example of a case where we don't want to check in these things. So with library, we also want to make sure that we're not committing these files either. Just like we did for the temp folder, library has a bunch of extra files in it that's just going to cause, these are specific to your machine only. They get recreated every time when Unity starts. So if I go in here and I just delete the library folder, and I reopen Unity, and Unity will try to recreate that library folder every time I make it. So the thing I need to do is I need to make this thing to be ignored. So I'm going to say unversion and add to ignore list. And I'm going to commit that. And it's going to delete all the existing files on the server that got checked in that I don't need. Remove library from SVN server. Because I don't need that to be checked in either. What I need is I need to actually have it be ignored every time. Update the working copy. Hit OK. Now it's going to delete that from the server. And now no matter what's in here, it won't care. So if I delete this folder again, You should only ever see assets and project settings is the way you can tell that you set up your project correctly. And let's say I just go in here and I open up my scene and I go and I add a plane and I add a bunch of cubes, and I can take these cubes and duplicate them. I save my scene, close Unity, and I commit. Notice it has my scene that I made, all the ones in the root, and any other meta files that it found. I'm going to click all of them and do a check in all scenes. Hit OK. And now other people can check this folder out, and they can work in the same Unity project in their own scene, and we're not going to stomp over each other's work, which is the key. Okay? All right, so let me go over that one more time, just to review, so you guys make sure that you understand how to do this. I'm going to do this all from scratch again, from brand new Unity project. So I'm going to make a brand new Unity project. New project here. Call it group project number 1 final, really final. Go under my project settings, under editor, change this to be visible meta files. Remember, you have the option of doing this as forced text if you want to. In my case, I'll just do it forced text for this project. Save the project, close it. I'm going to open up my repro browser. Go to my group name. I have a group project number 1 already there. I have this group project here. I'm going to drag it over here. Okay. Add that. It'll show up on the server here. I'm going to delete this project from my documents folder, because remember, that's not linked. If you wanted to link it, you would have to use the export command in SVN. But in this case here, I'm just going to check out group project number 1. I'm going to check out this project into a different folder. Group project number 1. Right there. So I deleted it, and then I immediately checked it out again. So there's my project and my assets. I'm going to have Unity open up that project. I'm going to click Open Other, point to my project, the one that I grabbed, open this guy up. Notice it makes a temp folder. I'm going to go here, SVN, add to ignore list recursively. I'm also going to ignore the library at this point too. So I'm going to say tortoise SVN, unversion, and add to ignore list. So both of those things will be ignored. Then I can check in. Notice it's going to actually delete all these things from the server because I don't want them checked. Adding ignore rules. Okay, and that's it. So now other people can grab this folder and work within it. Cool. All right, so let me show you what I have in plan for today. If this works, I'm going to open up. Hopefully, it'll correctly open my project. We shall see. I've had mixed luck with trying to open up projects from home. Let's open up this one here. So in my example here, I set up a little tiny game, and I'm going to show you how to do this. I'm going to go through step by step as a tutorial. I have a ball. I have 2 power-ups. The yellow pill is something that increases my speed and gives me a boost. And then at the end of it, it causes me to jump up in the air. That's one power-up. And then the second power-up is something that causes the white pill, which is just a white coin. When I pick that guy up, it makes me big. And in conjunction with the yellow pill, it makes me fast, and then I can jump up and down. And I have a bunch of palm trees in my level, just because palm trees are cool. So I can set these up to be, you can duplicate these guys, but they are separate power-ups. But there's a system in place where it can handle 1 or more power-ups at the same time. So right now I'm big, but I don't have super speed. And then I can grab the yellow coin, if I can reach it. Yes. And then I can go faster. Okay. So let me show you how to set this up so you can do something similar for Unity. I'm going to make a new scene. because I don't want to reuse anything that I have here. So I kind of want to set up power-ups the way I think about it when I'm doing power-ups for my own games and power-ups at work for whatever thing that I might be doing. And not that our game has power-ups, but if I was to do power-ups, like in Hunted the Demon Sword, we had buffs that you could cast on other people. So I'm going to translate what I would normally do in code to how I would handle it in Playmaker. And the main distinction you should make for your power-ups is that there's a difference between the thing that you pick up to give you the power-up and the thing that's actually buffing you while that power-up is active. You need to have those two things as separate objects. Maybe you don't even have pickups in your level that cause the power-up to occur, but whatever it is that gives you the power-up, you should separate that from the thing that's actually granting you the buff. So I'm going to call the thing that I pick up a power-up, and I'm going to call the thing that's giving you the buff a buff. So I'm going to make two separate sets of prefabs. The first thing I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to make a plane, and I'm just going to set up a simple ball moving, and I'm going to use this opportunity to show you how you can also do some stuff with the camera to attach the camera to the ball, because you guys might want to have a camera that follows your entity, and you don't necessarily want it to be static. Add a directional light here. So I have the directional light. I'm going to create a sphere. That's going to be my player. And I'm just going to set up a script on this guy. I'm going to call this guy game object sphere. Go to my Playmaker editor. I'm just going to set up a script that adds a force, just like what we did last week, where you guys set up a script to get the axis vector, and then you were using that to add force. I just want the ball moving around, so I'm going to make a variable for that. Add. I'm going to store the axis vector into the direction, and I'm going to move him there. Maybe multiply this by 5 and call this one moving. So by default, for some reason, my version of Playmaker doesn't warn me until I run once that I need a rigid body component. So make sure that you have a rigid body component on your guy. But now, I did not maximize this. Store vector here, map to plane, vector here, use owner, every frame. So I have this thing, this ball that moves and spins. That's cool. Stick a material on this guy. Have my directional light cast shadows. And I'm also going to hide state labels. So let's just set it up so that I can create a power-up that gets attached to this guy. I have a ball that rolls around. Cool. And I just want to make a pickup that when I walk over it, that it causes me to get a buff that makes me move faster and scales me up. Okay? So I'm going to make an empty object. I want to call this one the game object power-up. And this guy is a very standard game object with a trigger attached to it. I'm going to go here and I'm going to add a cube to this guy. I'm going to parent it to here. Call this thing the trigger. Let's move the power-up slightly out of the way. So that's my power-up. Go to my trigger, say it's a trigger, hide the mesh renderer, and I think I want to use something to signify that it's actually in the world. So I'm going to go to my objects, and I'm just going to give it like this thing. I'm going to give it a coin to look at. So wherever the power-up is, that's what a coin is. And I don't want to pop a coin. I'm just going to use this guy here. There's my power-up. There's my coin. Move it down a little bit so it matches. So I want to set it up so that when I run over that coin, I get the power-up. So let's go to my Playmaker. This is on my trigger. I'm going to add a trigger event here, a very standard trigger. When someone touches me, call this one waiting. And then this one is going to be grant power up. So grant power up, all it's going to do is just going to destroy itself for now. It's not the finished event, it's touched. Cool. I just want to make sure that my power up, when I touch it, will actually go away. So I can walk over here, and cool. I actually don't want it to destroy itself. I want to destroy the total power up here. Very simple, nothing really fancy about it. Just I run over the coin and it goes away. Okay, cool. I have a power up now. Create a folder for power ups. This is a very generic one. I'm going to use this. I'm going to be more specific with this layer. This is going to give me speed. Let's make the buff now. What I want the power up to do is I want it to make an object that I'm going to stick, and I'm going to attach it to the player, and the player is going to get granted a speed buff. So I'm going to create an empty object here. This one is going to be called the buff, and I'm going to call this one buff_speed. So this thing, I want it so that when I add it to the sphere, as long as it's on the sphere, that it's going to speed up the player. So I'm going to have two states for it, and I also want it to last only for a few seconds. After a few seconds are up, I want it to destroy itself and clean itself up. So the first step is going to be, the first state is going to be granting power up, and it's going to take, in this state, it's going to just wait 3 seconds. Then it's finished, and it's going to destroy itself. Cool. Right now, I started off attached to the player. So if I play, it should live for 3 seconds and then go away. Cool. So I know that the power-up will clean itself up. This isn't much of a buff yet. I wanted to actually adjust the speed. The easiest way to adjust the speed is right now the speed is dictated by this multiplier here. Why don't I make a variable that it can use to actually specify the speed? I'm going to make a global variable here called speed. Looks like I already made one. And I'm going to use that instead of actually typing it in as 5 here. I'm going to use the global speed here. And I've defaulted the global speed to be 5. What that means now is that in my buff for speed, when it's granting the power up, I can just call a set float. I'm going to set the float of the speed to be 20 instead of 5. So as long as this state is active, it'll be 20. And then as soon as it's ready to destroy itself, I'm going to reset it back to what it was before, which is 5. So I have a buff now. As soon as I unpause it, I can move really fast, and then power-up goes away, and now I'm back to normal speed. So the way this works is all I have to do is spawn this thing, and really as soon as I spawn it, it's going to adjust the speed. And I'm going to go to my power-up now. I'm going to actually make this thing a prefab. Delete this thing. Go to my trigger. Where it says grant power-up, I'm going to create an object. And the object I'm going to create is the buff here. And I want to spawn it on the person that touched me. That's where I want to spawn the point. I don't have to. I mean, I could just leave it like this. This will actually work. But I want to put a particle system on it that'll make it obvious that I have a buff. So right now I'm moving. I'm going to run over this power up, and I have a buff. Notice the buff is currently not on the player here. The buff is just out in the middle of the world. So I want to change that because I want to take my buff, and I want to stick a particle system on it. So I know that I'm actually being buffed. Go here, create a particle system, parent this particle system to the buff, reset its position. I kind of like the shape, so I'm just going to lower this. I'm going to take the speed. I'm going to set the simulation space to be world space because otherwise it'll spin. I'll show you what that looks like anyway. Make it look like that. So now it's emitting particles where the buff is. I could update this prefab. So now when I play and I create this thing, or when I run over this power up, it creates a power-up in the center of the world. I want that thing attached to the player, though. So not only do I want this power-up to spawn the buff, but I want it to take the buff that it spawned, and I want it to attach it to the guy that touched me. So when I create the object, I want to call setParent. SetParent is basically the same thing as you taking this buff and dragging it onto this thing. That's the same exact behavior. So here, I'm going to set the parent. The thing I want to set the parent of is the buff that I just spawned. So I need to store the buff that I just spawned here. And make a buff object. Go here. Store the buff object. I'm going to take that buff object and I'm going to attach it to the thing that touched the trigger, which was earlier here. So I need to store the person that touched me here. Player. Store that in player. Go to this state and set the parent to be the player. I'm also going to reset the position and rotation when that happens. So now what will happen is that when I run over that power up, it will spawn the buff and then attach it to my player. Notice that it's spinning with me right now, even though I'm moving really fast. And maybe I want my buff to last a little bit longer. I think that seems reasonable. Go here and make it last for 10 seconds. If I go to my particle system, you can change the simulation space to be world, and that will cause it to always spawn its particles in world space as opposed to being in the local parent space. I didn't apply this prefab. The particles aren't showing up because I haven't actually set up the speed correctly. I want this thing here. Just put this guy in the world. Okay. Enable that guy. That's what I want my particle system to kind of look like. Maybe it doesn't last that long. I'm using a gravity multiplier because it's an easy way to like accelerate the thing, so I can have it go up in space. Okay. Apply that. Delete this guy out of the level. This buff should now have this thing set up to be spawning in world space. Cool. Oh, another thing too is that the particle system's position is not at 0, 0, 0. Now when I run around, I'm emitting little trails that indicate that I have a power-up. And as soon as the buff is gone, the particle will be gone. Okay, cool. So this power-up, which I'm going to rename speed. I'm actually going to rename the prefab too. Is working for a very simple case of buffing my speed. If I want to make one that buffs my, let's say, increases my scale, I can do that really easily too. Instead of a speed, I'm going to make another one of these. I'm going to rename this one to be size. And I'm going to make a buff. I'm going to duplicate this thing. And instead of making it speed, I'm going to make this one be size. I'm going to make 2 new prefabs out of each of these. So there's my power-up and there's my buff. So I have a buff for size and a buff for speed. So if I go to my buff for my power-up for size and I edit its trigger, the only thing I need to change is the buff that it actually creates here. I'm just going to have it spawn this guy instead of the speed. And then for my size, instead of modifying the speed, I want to change the scale of whoever I'm currently on. So I call set scale. Oops. I don't want to set the speed anymore. The thing I want to set the scale on is going to be my parent. I'm attached to the guy that touched me. So I'm going to say whoever touches me, scale him up times 4. In order to get the parent, I'm going to call getParent. I need to make a variable to store that in. I'm going to call this one parent. here. So I'm going to get the parent, store it here. I'm just going to scale up all 4 of these. And then when it's done, instead of putting the speed back to normal, I'm going to set the scale back to normal. That's it. So there's my buff for size. My buff for size, I'm just going to stick on a different color on it. Maybe I want green, a color sheet. Yeah, this guy. My power up here. I'll have them be white. Okay, so my size power up is, I have a buff accidentally, I need to delete that. Okay, so when I get my size, when I collect my size one, that was my size. That was not updated correctly. I did not actually edit the correct one. Okay, parent, set scale, get power up size. Cool. See that again. This is my buff for my size, and I don't think I'm setting, oh, I didn't specify who to actually set the scale on. Go back to my buff for my size, set scale on the parent, and set scale back to the parent. Okay. Now I'm huge and fast. This will last for 10 seconds. So notice I had 2 buffs on me at the same time, and they both did their own separate behavior. They didn't care about one another. They just kind of worked at the same time. So you can make however many number of power-ups you want, and it'll still work correctly. Okay, so I want to show you 2 more things, and I'm going to let you work. One, I want to show you how to bind the camera to a rolling object, because by default, if I just stick this camera on the sphere and I roll, the camera actually starts spinning with the level, and that's not really what you want. That would be a messed up power-up, yeah. You could do that, though. So it's not really as straightforward as just making more objects. You actually have to set up a script to update the camera position, but let me show you how to set that up. So I'm going to create an empty object, and I'm going to call this one the player. And there's my sphere. And I'm going to stick my camera there. And the way I want to set this up is I want to adjust the position of the camera to always be where the sphere is, but not rotate it. I just want to move the camera to be where the player's sphere is without rotating it. I could just do it here inside the sphere script, but I'm actually going to separate it out so that this thing is the only thing that does the camera movement. So go here, and what you need to do is you need to get the position of the sphere. So I'm going to get the position of the sphere. I'm going to store it. You're basically manually moving the camera every frame, as opposed to letting Unity do it for you. So I'm going to store the position of the sphere here, and then I'm going to call set position and do this every frame. And I'm just going to set the position of the camera to where the sphere is. I'm going to specify the game object to be the camera. I'm just going to say move the main camera to where the sphere is every frame. The problem with this is that it's going to just stick the camera like right on the sphere. So now, although the camera is there, oops, I didn't actually update it every frame. Although the camera is attached to the ball, it's like directly inside the ball. So you're huge, and you see like the corner of your ball there. I want to actually just use the ball's position, but I want to pull the camera back a little bit. So in between getting and setting the position, I just want to add a little bit. So I'm going to call vector 3 add. I'm going to add a little bit to the position of the sphere. I want to just pull it up a little bit, maybe 4 units. I want to pull it back a little bit, maybe 10 units. Maybe 6. So now when I move the ball, the camera moves with it and doesn't spin with the ball, right? And you can adjust the position of the camera by adjusting the position here. So I can scroll this back, just move this one maybe here. I want to move this one here. That's a good way to have it follow the physics object. So keep that in mind if you're trying to do ball rotation with your object. Okay, and then a few more things. You need to add sounds, right? You got to add sounds for your power-up. And as I showed you last week, I like to use BFXR. So I feel like sounds are really, really, they add a lot. I don't even know if I have sound enabled right now. I do. I think everyone saw this last week, right? It actually has a button to make a power-up. I feel like that's a good one. Export this one on my desktop, power up, and I'll just mutate this guy. Mutate is great because it lets you take an existing WAV file and just make it a little bit different, but not make it like so different that it's not, you can't recognize that it's the same sound. Go to my desktop, grab both of these power-ups, put them in audio. Really simple. In each of these, when I edit the state and I grant the power-up, sound, and I'm just going to have to play one of these and one of these. Maybe only have 2 of these. Copy this guy and do the same thing for this. Oops. Sound. Oops. Play random sound. Power up 1, power up 2. Oh, I did not actually trigger. Move that to the end, and then go here, move this one to the end, move this one to be first. And I'm going to play it. Quiet, but I got a power up, cool. And then it's kind of common also to let the player know how long they have until the power up runs out. It's not really fair to just kind of hide how long power ups last. So really simple things you can do is you can play audio that changes based on how much time is left. You can play a different particle effect, whether it's about to run out or not. Just let the player know how much time they have remaining. Okay. All right, and then the final step is I'm going to just show you really quickly how you can set up some simple terrain in your level that you can use. There's a whole tutorial on terrain that does a much more in-depth version of this, but to do something really simple takes really no time at all. I can take my terrain object. You can just make a terrain like you would make anything else. Move it down a little bit. I can delete my plane out of the level. And terrain is just really super dead simple. You just pick these tools of what you want. First of all, you're going to kind of like construct your terrain. You pick your brush size and your various brushes of what you want. You can make it bumpy or pick how strong you want it as well. And then you can also smooth terrain out so it's not quite so crazy. Once you have terrain that looks okay, you can add some textures. You can download a terrain pack for free off Unity. Unity doesn't include it by default with the Unity install because it tends to be kind of big. But you can you can just download off the asset store, and it comes with a bunch of terrain textures and assets that you might be able to use. So I can add a grass texture. You just pick this, and you can just paint grass wherever you want. Cool. You can do a much better job. You should actually like paint it more appropriately. Trees are also super easy. If you download the Unity Asset Store terrain pack, you'll get a bunch of trees. Right now, I only have a palm tree, which is fine for now. You can manually click and place trees around the level, or you can just click mass place trees, and it will just place them all over the level, which is nice. Details as well, you can add shrubbery and such. It might help you, yeah, instead of having to like do all of your geometry editing in another tool, this might be easier for some of you just to do a terrain, right? Let me just move this here. So I have my terrain. Just play my level. Oh, my power-ups are too high. Take both of these guys. Drop them down to the ground. Camera for now. So I have a terrain, and I can go. And I did other things in my power-up where when the power-up ended, I gave you another boost, but you can kind of do whatever you want with your power-ups. But that by itself is just a beginning tutorial on how to set them up using Playmaker. I recommend doing something that separates out the idea of a power-up and a buff, and also separating out each buff into its own object that gets added and removed by itself. So it takes care of its own lifetime. You might want power-ups that last longer. You might want power-ups that affect other people, not just yourself, but you should still separate them out into their own individual objects. Okay. Cool. All right. Went over that super fast, but questions on any of that? Okay, I'm going to give you guys like 2.5 hours to work in your groups on whatever it is that you want to work. I'm going to reserve the last 30 minutes for the lecture, for the PowerPoint I have, and then give you guys your homework, and we're done.